Ontario Premier Doug Ford getting his way. The entire slate of directors at Hydro One set to leave by August 15th, and CEO Mayo Schmidt already gone with a $400,000 retirement lump sum. It's a story Richard LeBlanc has been tracking. He's a corporate governance professor at York University. Richard, we had talked about this story on the campaign trail where Doug Ford zeroed in on Mayo Schmidt, called him the $6 million man. With this development, what's been your reaction?
It's a big win for Doug Ford right out of the gate, and it's a good thing for governance and shareholder accountability. I'm not surprised that he replaced the board. The government had the authority to do that. I am surprised that the incumbent CEO walked away from some $10.7 million in severance. He's able to retain $7 million in earned restricted shares, but being able to fire the CEO for a reduced fee of $400,000 is certainly over the top and a very big win for Ford.
I just want to get more specifically into the numbers. So that $10 million figure, people have used that a lot. That would be a severance agreement in place for a termination without cause after change in control of the business.
That's exactly right.
So we're, is that an apples to apples? Maybe we should be talking about the $5 million for straight termination without cause, which is still him leaving with $400,000 versus several million dollars. But just to be clear here.
Yeah, I thought, and I mentioned this earlier, John, I think the change in control was totally inappropriate. It was an effort to get around the agreement that the government had with Hydro One, and there were conditions that would trigger the change in control that I haven't seen before. So who knows what happened behind closed doors over the last couple of days. It might have been strong arm, hardball negotiating, which is, you're not getting this severance, and you can sue us and you can retain a lawyer. I mean, I'm speculating here, but seeing what happens behind closed doors, I think it is a big win for the CEO to walk away from that, and it could have been a legal challenge. And I think that the board never should have approved this change in control provision and exorbitant severance of that nature for a utility that's ultimately 50% owned by the taxpayer.
So you're saying that Mayo Schmidt may have felt strong-armed here, that his options weren't great, and a $400,000 lump sum looks pretty good given the alternatives?
Yeah, I'm as I said, I'm speculating. I don't know, but there's got to be some explanation for walking away from that amount of money, and it might have been, an incentive. And Ford was questioned about this yesterday, and he didn't have really a clear answer. So we don't know, but the end result is very good for ratepayers.
Ratepayers, and you said some encouraging things on the governance side, but a lot of the analysts are weighing in today, and some of them, I'm reading one of the Bloomberg stories describing the company facing this Ontario overhang. In other words, if this is happening, what does this company mean from an investment perspective? So what would you say to that?
Well, I think a lot of that is exaggerated, and I think that generally you get what you pay for, but to be of the view that you cannot replace a board of directors and you can't replace a CEO is just folly. This reminds me of Canadian Pacific with Bill Ackman, and Bill looked at the board, and this board is very similar. Bill looked at the board and said, there's not a single director here with rail experience, and on the Hydro One board, there's not a single director with heavy utility and industry experience except for one that's 9 years out of an executive suite. So I think Ford's challenge right now to get a market support is to appoint directors that aren't, full of Order of Ontario and political affiliations and things like this, but really some solid directors who have got on-the-ground experience with utility expertise. And the challenge of this board is to find an incoming CEO that's paid appropriately, $1 million, $1.5 million compared to other public utilities across Canada and in the U.S., with some strong performance incentives to get hydro rates down by some 12%, which is what Ford wants.
So the board can play that role. Like, we're trying to figure out how these hydro rates are going to come down, and we haven't really gotten concrete answers. We did hear the Premier say, I'm open to suggestions on that, but it sounds like you're saying if you get on the board a lot of industry know-how, and you seem to be suggesting they didn't have enough industry know-how on the board of directors.
Correct.
That can be some good brain power to try to get to this conclusion.
Better said than I could have put it, John. That's exactly right. So Ford hedged a bit yesterday. He said, listen, I can't tell you how this is going to happen. I'm not an energy expert. He mentioned the Green Energy Act, but the marching orders here from the shareholder are to reduce hydro rates.
So now Jameson Burko was telling us other big shareholders, this is not just the Ontario government story. They are obviously a
53%.
Big shareholder,
Yep.
but it sounded like some of those other major shareholders now play a role as well in trying to find this new board of directors.
That's right. There's a separate committee of 53% shareholders to find the best directors in Canada and internationally who can play this role that you just mentioned. Absolutely.
And if you were advising a potential CEO candidate who got approached with respect to, coming to Hydro One, let's say, hypothetically, what would you be talking to them about?
This is not about you. This is not about money. This is a major utility. It's heavily under government scrutiny. It cost the past government the election. You need to have political sensitivities. You need to, be appropriately incented. But it's not about you. And that advice, by the way, is for the directors as well. This is not about you. This is your fiduciary duty to ratepayers and to the best interests of the organization as a whole. Not about executive pay for directors or executives.
And you think that they can attract lots of top talent?
Absolutely.
With that mandate or that thinking?
There's no shortage. And anyone who says that they can't is wrong. It's a myth perpetuated by pay consultants and by CEOs themselves that if I don't get paid what I'm worth, you're never going to find the talent.
I mean, if you're saying that, we should probably have a deeper conversation around why pay packages are so big in the first place.
Exactly. And that's why this is a teachable moment for shareholders that if directors let pay get out of control, they should be able to be replaced by shareholders, and that's exactly what Ford did.
What do you think? I think a lot of our viewers, I mean, you're not an analyst, you're not a stock market analyst or a money manager, but I think some of our viewers have probably looked at Hydro One as an investment. Maybe they're owners of the stock. They're probably wondering about this story of investor confidence. We'll see what happens with the stock price today. But how does the company rebuild that investor confidence?
Well, hang in there, and I think this is still a buy. It's a monopoly in Ontario with utility.
You're not you're not.
I'm not an analyst, but I'm saying, listen, this has been done before, right? There's been activists that are replacing boards of directors that are very active, and I think Ford is a bit of an activist. So I would suggest hang in there and see what happens. But I think this is Ford's next move is to appoint the right directors and the right CEO.
It's kind of interesting. You use the Bill Mackman example with CP. You think of the Premier of Ontario as being like an activist investor.
There's a parallel, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Richard, thanks a lot for stopping by. Richard
My pleasure.
LeBlanc, corporate governance expert and professor at York University.